Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we'll be building a simple project with JavaScript, and it is going to be a shopping list. As you can see, I already have 3 items on the page. I can add more items like so. Let's say dog food, and if I click on this add button, it's going to add it to my list. And I can hover over it and the cursor pointer changes, so it gives me a notion that I can click on it. So if I do click, you see that I have a check mark, so I can check mark all the items that I bought already. Maybe I want to buy cat food, and this time I'm not going to click on the add, but I'm going to press enter on my keyboard, and it's going to do the same thing. As you can see, I can also click to untick it from the item. Okay, and also I can click on here the cross or the remove icon right here, so it's going to delete the items from my list. And if I don't have anything in the input and then I press on add, it's actually going to alert me saying please add an item. Alright, so in this video I will show you how to create a shopping list program like so. The prerequisite for this video will be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. At least the basic understanding of those 3 topics will suffice for this video. If you want to learn more about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I do have a playlist on all of these topics. I have a JavaScript crash course, more than 2 hours if you want to dive into that. All the links are going to be in the description and the card for your convenience. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this smaller and refresh. This is the finished product. And here, as you can see, I have created a to-do for this project. I usually do this every time I work on a project. First, I write down what I want to do design-wise and the logic of the project. So for the HTML CSS, I wanted to keep it very simple. I am not going to focus on CSS too much. In fact, I'll be working on a CSS framework. It's a very dead simple boilerplate framework for CSS. It's called Skeleton. We will show you in a moment. And so for the HTML CSS, we are looking to get a title, which will be right here, the shopping list. And then we'll definitely have an input field to get the items from the user. Then we'll have the add button, and we will add the remove button. And this button, I wrote button, it could be anything. It could be a pseudo element that you create with CSS, or it could be just a span. I believe I'll be using a span to the list items, and then hover effect to the list items, and also the checked class. So I will have a class called checked, which will be added once I click on this list element, and that checked class will have a pseudo element before this tick mark. Okay, and I'll show you all this, how we will do it. Now, JavaScript, the logic wise, first of all, obviously we will grab all the necessary elements from the DOM, which is document object model, and then add event listener to this add button, because this is the button that needs the add on click event. So if I add something, let's say subscribe, and add it, it's adding to the list. So with this button right here, everything needs to be done. So definitely I need to grab this element and all other element that I need to add the event listener to. And obviously create list items and display. So this one is created by JavaScript. Okay, and then display it. I will add event listener also to the remove button so that I can remove it. And also once this list items also needs to be clickable, because I want to add the check class via JavaScript as well. All right, at this point though, since you know what we all will be creating, you can pause this video and try it yourself and see if you can accomplish this this application. It does not have to look like this, but if you try it yourself, I think that's the best way to learn programming. If you're stuck, you can come back to video and see how I did it. If you're successful, then also come back to video, and then we can compare our codes together, see if I did something different than what you did, because there are multiple ways you can approach this project. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and start this. All right, so what I'm going to do, so I'm in an empty folder right now. I'm going to create 3 files. The first file is going to be for index.html. All right, and then the next file, I'm obviously going to create my style.css. All right, and then the third file I'm going to create is called app.js, and this is going to be my script JavaScript file. I want to make sure that my font size is the right size, so you can see. Okay, it looks all right, 26. Okay, so right now in the index HTML, I'm going to go ahead and press exclamation and click on the emit abbreviation. That's going to give me a boilerplate for the index file. I'm obviously going to change this title to shopping list. Now if I save this, and right here, as you can see, this server is actually running. So I do have a live server installed. So if you go to the extension of Visual Studio Code and search live server, if you install it, it's going to spin up a local server for me, so I don't have to refresh the page every time I make any changes. So if I'm saving this one right here, if I go to localhost 5501, that's the port I'm using for the live server. If I refresh this, as of right now, you see that I don't have anything because I don't have nothing. So let me go ahead and put a title right here. Let's just say shopping list, like so. If I save this, you see the shopping list right now on the page. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is obviously I'm going to link my style sheet that I just created right here. So that's going to be my style.css file. Save that, and underneath that I will also add my script source. My script source is going to be app.js because that's what I named my JavaScript file. Also, I am going to add this keyword differ, so it's actually making sure that my HTML is not waiting for my JavaScript to load. All right, so my links are all set up right here. So let me go ahead in the to-do, and obviously I do have my title. Let's work on the input field and the add button. Okay, so at this point right now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this, and I want everything to be in a div. It's kind of like an outer wrapper. It's kind of like a container wrapper. It's going to be for everything will be in this div. So now I will add the title again, shopping list. Underneath that, I will also have a div, and this will have a class that will have like input div, and in this div I will have the input field and also the button, the add button. So I'll say input, and here text, and also I will do this underneath the button, and that will also have an add. So if I save this, you can see that I have an input right here and the add button like so. For the input, I will add something else. I will add a placeholder that will just say add items ... Save. You can see that it's actually give your user a hint what they want to put here. And also I want to add an ID, and I'm going to call this ID my input. Save this. All right, okay, that's good. I also want to give this a class of button to the button right here, and after the div, so I have the title, I have the div, input, and add button, and after this I would need to list my items that I'm going to put it right here. So I'm going to create an UL like so. And here, what I'm going to do, instead of creating li directly, I'm actually going to have a div. Within this div, I'll have a list item, and I'll have a span. And the reason I'm doing this, because I will have the list item, let's say buy milk. I'm going to just hard code some items right here. And I will, at this point, I will actually have that delete or cross. And if I save this, as you can see right now, it is showing up buy milk and the cross icon right now. Okay. Now, why did I wrap this list item and span in a div? That's because I want to call flex so that it appears on the same line. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a class here, and it will say list wrapper. Save this. Okay. I will style this later, but let me go ahead and copy this structure 2 more times. And here I'm gonna, instead of milk, I'm gonna say bread. And here I'm gonna say cookies. Save. Okay, so I do have 3 items right here. Now let's go ahead. Since I don't want to focus too much on the style sheet, I'm going to use something called a skeleton. It's a framework. It's a very, as you can see, they claim to be dead simple responsive boilerplate, and I really like this because it's you just have as much. you need for like a simple project. They have a not too much, like it's not overcomplicated. It's not like full-fledged like anything like Bootstrap or anything like that. So for this project, I think skeleton CSS will be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I am going to search in my Google, which will get me to this. So if you search skeleton CSS CDN, okay, skeleton CSS CDN on the Google, you will get this Cloudflare, and they have this link right here. Don't worry, I will provide this link in the project and in my GitHub resource, so you can copy that from here, from my GitHub repo. So I'm going to copy the link right here, and I'm going to paste it just underneath my link. Okay, so save it right here. Now if I go back to my project, you can see immediately I see a change. Okay, I do have the font list change and everything. All right, as of right now, you see that all of my items and everything is stuck to the left. So skeleton CSS actually gives me a class that's called a container. As you know that I already wrap everything into a div, in the outer div. I'm going to go ahead and add the class here, and I'm going to say container. So if I save this, now the container is actually working. Okay, so that's better. All right, now for the input, I want it to be like take the full width. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a class. Put the class in the input, and this is the class coming from skeleton CSS. So all I have to do is u dash, and I'm going to say full dash width. And if I save this, you see right now, if I make it bigger, I have a nice size input field, and it's all responsive. Okay, the only problem is right now is that the add button appears in a new line, which we will fix it in a moment through our style sheet. So let's go back to our style sheet and try to style it on our own way. The first thing, I'm gonna grab the H2 shopping list right here, because I want to give margin top and bottom, because I just need a little bit of padding. So I'll give it a margin. So I'll say margin, and top and bottom will be 20 pixel, and then left and right will be 0. Now if I save this, you don't see any change right here, because all the styles currently coming from the skeleton framework. So in order to override this, I'm going to use the keyword that is important. So save. With the important, now you see there is a 20 pixel margin. With the important, I'm just overriding the styles. So the next one is I'm going to go ahead and make this input and the add button side by side. So I definitely know that I have a div class input div that I wrapped my input and button together. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. This is a class, so dot, and then open up curly braces. And there I'm simply going to say display flex. So if I save this, as you can see that it is now together. Now if I make it bigger, and it looks nice as well as this point. All right, so next let me go ahead and style my input a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I think it is an ID. So my input, I'm gonna first say border radius. I don't want any border radius, okay? And obviously this is gonna be important, so there is no border radius, like so. And also I'm gonna go ahead and do border right, and border right is also going to be 0 with important. Save it. So at this point the input does not have any border to the right. Let's grab the class of button, and that one will have pretty much the same thing. Border radius 0, but instead of right, it's going to be the left, because I don't want this border right here. So as of right now, it looks like the add button is integrated with the input. Let me go ahead and give a background. I'm just going to copy this one from my reference right here, save it. So the background, I gave it a light gray, okay, right here, and also important because, you know, I'm overriding styles right now. So this is a gray color as of right now. So let me go ahead and make it something like add a hover effect. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this one and add the hover like so. So what's the hover is actually going to do is actually going to change the color to from light gray to simply gray. So if I save this, as you can see now, if I hover over it, the background color changes to gray. Now this color of the font, I want to change that because it's not really that much visible right now. So I'm going to say white and obviously important. So there we go. Now it works perfect. And if I make it bigger, you can see it's always responsive, and that's the magic from the skeleton, because you don't have to really do anything. It is automatically responsive for you. So after the button and button div, input div, let's go ahead and style this list right here. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the UL and the div. So if I go back to index, you see that under my UL, the first thing I have is a div, and it's wrapping each list and span. All right. So for the UL div, I want it to have a display of flex, and that's going to put together. And here it is two, like now I need a space between these two items. So let's go ahead and do that. Justify content space between. And if I save this, you see that it is now nice space between them. I also want to do align items, so the items are centered, aligned centered. And one more thing I want to do is call border. I want to add a border bottom, and that's just going to be thin, solid color, and light gray. So if I save this, there's my border at the bottom. Let me go ahead and give a little bit of margin. It's not going to be too much. It's going to be just 0.5 EM. So okay, there's a little bit of space. That's good. All right, now after the UL div, I will go ahead and grab the li. So I worked on the UL div, then I am going inside of the div to the li to style. So I want to get rid of this list style. So let's go and do that. Let's say list style none. So if I save this, okay, then it's gone. I'll give padding as well, and that's padding is going to be for 10 pixel. All right. Okay, now it's good. It's padding to it, looks good. All right, now I also want to go back because I want to add a hover effect to the div itself. So I'm going to copy this one right now, and I'll say hover. And what I want when it's hover, I want to change the background color. So I'm going to go ahead and do background and light gray, save. So as you can see, now it is change the background color to light gray. Once I hover over it, I also want to change the cursor pointer, so it gives me a notion that I can click on it. All right, great. Another thing I want to do is once I hover over it, I want to show that I can have like a line through of it. So if you see the finished product, you see that if I hover it, there's a line through on the list. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, I'm going to put this again, and while I am hovering over div hover, I want to make this change to the list, only the list, nothing else. Okay, I will say text decoration line through, save. Now you can see that if I hovering over the div, it is only having a text decoration of line through to the list item. Now if I don't have this, you see that the line actually will go to anything that is inside that div, because we just call the text decoration on the div hover. All right, so I don't need that. I want the list specifically so that it doesn't spill over any other element. Let's go back to the span right here. So I can just grab that item just by saying span, and that's going to be also, I'm just cursor pointer so that it's clickable. And also I'll give I'll give a little bit of padding to the right. All right, now too much is just going to be simple 5 pixel. All right, looks nice. And pretty much done. Now it's time for, let me go back my to-do. Let me see, I created the input field, add button, add remove button to the list item, hover effect. Now the last item is checked class. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll create that checked class, and it is a class. That's why I am putting a dot in front of it. So the text checked class will have this text decoration line through. So once the checked class is going to be added to the list, it will automatically have a text decoration line through. So if I save this one, you don't really see anything because that checked needs to be added to a list item. So let's get and do that. Let's do it on my second item right here. So just to see what's going on. Okay. So if I save it right now, you see that just adding that checklist, it is now permanently have line through. Okay, great. Also, I want to do is I want to add like a check mark right here, and I'm going to do this through a pseudo element that is going to be before, because it's going to come before the list item. Okay, so before, and what I want to add a content. What's going to be the content? What I want to add, right? So within the quotation, I'm going to open up my emoji plate, right? So, and this is what I want. I want to have position absolute for this, and I want left. I want that tick mark to the far left. So I'm going to say left 0. So please don't have any margin padding or anything. Push the tick mark to the left as possible. That's what's left 0 means, with the position of absolute. As you can see now, this looks good. Okay, so if I any of the items that will have the check class attached to, it's going to look like this. All right, awesome. I'm going to go back and just get that class out of here. And then in terms of the CSS part, that's all we have to do. There's nothing else we need right now. Okay, so I am going to close the styles. If we need it, we can just come back, obviously, but as of right now, I'm going to close the style. Okay, so let's go to work on the application for the JavaScript. So all this done. So for JavaScript, the first thing what we're going to do is grab all the necessary elements from the document object model. So let's go ahead and just do that. The first thing, obviously, I'm going to do this add button. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say add. I'm going to call this add button as well. I'm going to put all this to a variable called add button. I'm going to say document dot query selector. And I like to use query selector than anything else. You can use get element by class, get element tag. Everything is fair game. I just like to use query selector because within that quotation, I can then grab items with the CSS selector, right? So as of right now, I know the add button has a class of button. So that's what I'm going to do. Add button document.query selector, and it's a class. So with a dot. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and copy this one more time, and here this one is actually going to be my input. My input has an ID. So let's do this. So right now I have access to my add button. I have access to my input field rights. So I also need an access to the UL. So this one right here, UL, because my thought process is when I'm going to create each element, each item to the list, I have to follow this structure like so. So I have to create a div, and then within that div, I have to create the list and the span. Okay, so all this needs to be created through JavaScript and then added to the list UL that's already exists on my HTML. So I do need to grab that. So I'll say const. I'm just going to call it UL, and I'm going to go ahead and then copy this one right here, and this is just a tag, so I'm just going to go ahead and select that by UL. Okay, perfect. Now let's go back to do. I already grabbed all the items. Now add event listener to add button. Now I can do that by two ways. So this is the add button right now, right? So I'm gonna copy this dot add event listener like so, and then open parentheses in the quotation. I can specify what event I want to listen to, which is gonna be the click, and here comma just perform some function like so. And I'm gonna just say alert me saying working. Okay, so if I say this right now, if I click, it should alert me, and the word working will be in there in that alert. So if I click on here, you see that working. Okay, so I can actually add the event listener through JavaScript like so, or I can do something else. I can actually create a function. Instead of adding the event listener, I just create a function right now. So let's go ahead and create the function. I'm gonna say add new item. That's what the button is going to do, and that's going to be the function name, add new item. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, alert saying working. So save this. Now this function is created, it's not added to anything. So let's go back to index, And in my button right here, I can add this with an attribute called onClick. Okay, onClick equals to, in the quotation, I have to add this function name. So that's going to be add new item, and then I also have to invoke it by adding this parentheses, invoke the function. Okay, so once this button get on click, invoke this function, and it's gonna go directly to the script tag. Is there a function add new item? Yes, there is, and then whatever it's in the function will be executed. So if I save this, if I click the add button right now, you can see it works as the same way. It alert me with the word working. All right, I'm gonna comment the upper one right now. I'm gonna go with this process as of right now, because I'm also going to add event listener to all this span, and that I'm going to do it through JavaScript. I'm not gonna add on click. Okay, I want to show you both ways. Okay, so in this function, all of the other functionalities like creating elements and adding it to the UL and everything will be under this particular function, because I want to click on the add button, and then it should create all the elements and display it. All right, so let's do that. Now, what's the first thing I'm gonna do? I'm going to grab the text that I am putting right here. Okay, I need to grab this, whatever I'm putting right here, and then add it to the list. How can I do this? So let's create a variable, let, and it's gonna be obviously new item, because that's what I'm adding. So I do have access to this input, which is my input. So I'm gonna say my input dot, I can say my input dot value. Now what that means is that if I go back to index, and if you see in the my input, I can also have an attribute that is value equals to, and I can just write whatever, right? And if I save this, you can see that now that value updates to the text of the input. Okay, so even if I don't add this to the input actually have an attribute called value. And here I'm actually getting that value, that the text, whatever I'm putting right here. So let's say subscribe, that is going to the input value, and I'm getting that input value, my input dot value, and then saving it into that variable called new item. So if I do this, save, okay, now if I do alert with new item, let's see if it works. So this time I'm gonna put something. So I'm gonna say subscribe, add. You see that now alert has the word subscribe in it. Whatever I'm gonna write here, gibberish, add, it's gonna give me that, because I am saving whatever I'm putting in my input value. I'm saving it to this variable right here. Okay, so that's great. So I have the access to the text here. So I'm gonna delete the alert. Now I need to create the same structure that exists in my UL, the same structure, div. I also want to add the class list wrapper to the div, and I want to create the list item. Then I will create the span item. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just comment this one. I'm going to say create elements. And here, the first element I will be creating, and that's going to be a div. So const, I'll call this div, const div. It's going to be document dot create element. And what do I want to create? I want to create a div. Okay, so right now I create a div. What else I want to do? I want to add the list wrapper class to the div. So how can I access the div class? I can access the div class by saying class list. Every element has a class list. Okay, so I can just do like this, parentheses, and in the quotation I can just copy the class that I want to add. So this div I created, this div also has kind of like an array, but it's like a token list, which is called a class list. In that class list I can add as many class I want, which right now I just want to add one class, which is list wrapper. All right, so that's good. I have the div and I have the class added to that div. Next one, I'm going to create the list, which is, I'm going to call it li. I'm going to go ahead and copy this one right now, and instead of div I want to create an li. With that li is just right here, li. Now this text content, the content of li, I want to change it to the text that I'm putting in the input. So let's do that. So I'm just going to say li dot, I want to change the text content. I'm going to just say text content equals to what I want this list to say. I want the list to say this new item, because the new item is the text that your user is going to put in the input value. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, straightforward. I'm creating a list and I'm updating its text content to the new item, to the text that is given by the user in the input. The third thing I will have to create is that span right here. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing. I'll go right here instead of list. I'm actually going to call this remove span. And here I'm going to do span. And again, remove span. Remove span will also have a text content. And that's going to be, in the quotation, is just going to be this delete here. So save. Okay, so I have created all the three elements that I need. I created the div, I created the list, and I created the span. Now, whenever you're creating elements through JavaScript, they are created separately. So at this moment, there is no relationship between div, list, and remove span. So in the index, when we write our HTML, we know the relationship between div and list. So div is the parent element to the list, okay? List and span, these two are the children element to the div. All right, so that relationship does not exist when you just create a separate element in JavaScript. So I have to manually create that relationship. I have to manually say that, hey, div li will be the children element to the div. Span will be the children element of the div. And then vice versa, div will be the parent element, okay? So for this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab the div first, div dot, I'm going to say append a child. So append as a child to this div is list, okay? Great. The first, I want the list to append it to div because the order matters here. If you add span to the div first, then it's going to add the span right here, then the list. So I'll show you an example in a moment. But the first thing I'm going to do is add the list, append it to the div. Then I'm going to do the same thing, append child, but this time I'm going to append remove span. Okay, so I have created the div, I've created a list, I've created a remove span. Now I'm establishing the relationship between all these three. Now, if I save this, you see if I write anything, it doesn't happen. It doesn't do anything right here because it's still the elements that you create to the JavaScript, they are still somewhere in JavaScript file. It's not added because I have to now literally add that to an element that already exists in my HTML, which is UL. And I grab this at the beginning of JavaScript file. So right here at the end, I'm going to grab UL and I'm going to do the same thing, dot append child, because now the div will be the children element to that UL. So here I'm going to say div. Now if I save this, let's see if it works. Okay, I'm going to say thanks for watching, and if I click on add, you see that now the items is added and it has all the classes that we defined, all the styles that we defined in the style sheet. Okay, great. Now the one I was mentioning before is that the order matters how you append this. Now if I, let's say if I write div.append child first, then list, if I save this, let's say working or whatever, you see that now remove comes first than the list item. So I'm going to go back and all right, so right now I do have a working shopping list. Now let's add the more features. Let's add the class that I can click on here, and it's going to add the class. So for this, I'm going to remain in this function because the div that I'm creating right now, I need to access this div. This div right here that I'm creating in this function only exists in this function. Outside of this function, nobody knows about this div, okay? Because this div is being created after I'm actually clicking on the add button. So here I'm going to say this div that I'm creating right now, in that div, I'm going to add an add event listener to it. And it's going to listen to click. And it's gonna fire a function like so, which will simply add a class to the list. Also, I have the list right here, so I'm gonna just say list.classList dot toggle, because you know we can grab the class list through the class list here. Toggle what class? It is going to be checked. So if I save it right now, if I add something, let's say by dog food and add it, you can see if I click on here, it's getting checked. If I click on unclick this, the unchecked is now gone. But one thing to important remember is that you see the only item that is actually working is the item that you just added. And all the 3 items that's already in my HTML, it does not get the check class, because all this happening to the items that is created through the div right here, not the div, through the function right here. And we're gonna solve that in a bit. Okay, so this one, it's good. Clicking it, and it has the check mark and everything's good. Let's go ahead and make this span right here, and then so that I can delete this item, right? So to do that, all I have is I do have the remove span. So let's go ahead and add the remove span and add the event listener. And it's also going to listen for a click event. And here I'm going to do a function and open up parentheses. So what it's actually going to do is simply going to make the div dot style dot display. I can also create styles through JavaScript. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to set the style of display of this div to none. So it's gone. So if I now add something, let's say by dog food, added, I can click on here, it gets the check class, also click on to uncheck it, and now if I click on the span right now, and it's all done, it is getting the display none. But nothing, this function actually work on the items that is already on the HTML. Okay, all right, so far. Now you might be thinking that why do I even have these 3 items? I can just go ahead and then delete all this, and I can do that. Let's go ahead and then just comment these items out, and I can now write, so let's say buy milk right now and add it, and it's gonna have the same thing. I can also add like bread right now and add it. Let's say I want to do cookies and added all these items right now here, and they're all working, right? Because all these functions, and then you can delete this, it works fine. The only problems begins when I already have and some items that is on the list. Okay, now I did not want to, this is going to be the easier solution, but I did not want to leave this. I didn't want to comment out. I wanted to know, like, what if I can make this work? Because if you think about it, at some point of, like, in the future in this application, you might want to save your items to, let's say, a database or maybe a local storage in your Chrome browser. In that case, once, you know, at this point, if I refresh anything that I'm adding, if I refresh, you see that it's gone. But if you're saving this one to any local storage or any database, it's going to save. And once the page is going to load, you want to load that items that you put before. So people are not going to just click the add button if they don't want to add anything. Maybe they already have some styles, the items on the page they want to interact with. So how are you going to do that then? So that's a problem, okay? We're going to solve the problem. We just don't want to add a function to the add only. You see that? And then nothing else works. We also want to work that these 3 items that's already on the page, maybe coming from a database or something like that. We want to have this functionality for that one as well. Okay, so let me show you how we can do this. I'm going to just refresh this. So I am going to grab all these divs here. I'm going to call this const divs equals to, and I'm going to say document. I'm going to say document. And here, instead of saying query selector, I'm going to say query selector all. Query selector all will grab all the divs. So it's going to grab multiple items with the same tag name or same class name. Okay, let me grab the list as well. So that one is actually not the list, actually it's going to be the spans. because I want to add the event listener to the div, okay, clickable, and also I want to add the event listener to the spans. So I'm going to do the same thing, and there are multiple spans, at least 3 spans right now in my HTML. So that's also going to be query selector all, and this time is actually going to be span. Okay. Now this div right now is only grabbing the items that exist on my HTML. These divs do not have any idea about the divs that's been created after I click on the add. Okay. All right. So we're going to leave this function alone. I'm going to go down. And at this point, I'm going to first work on this div. I want to add an event listener to this div. So I'm going to go and copy this and this divs because it's a multiple items divs. I can actually invoke a for each function. Okay, the for each function will give me a div, a single div. Okay, so and here it's an arrow function. So divs has multiple div in it. Dot for each I'll get single div, and I will do something with a single div. So with each div, I want to add an event listener to it. So add event listener, and what event listener is going to listen to is going to listen to click. All right, the same thing, click, and it's going to do some function. The function is going to do is simply is going to add to the list, okay, to the list, the class. Now I do not have the list. I don't have the list right now in my JavaScript. Okay, now do I want to grab the list? There's a better way to do things. So in the div right now, the div, let's say I want to console.log the div, save. I'm gonna make this bigger, and I'm gonna go ahead and inspect this, and you see that I will go to console. So right now, if I click on here, you see that it is giving me all the divs. Okay, so there is a div that is giving me the list wrapper list, and also it's giving me the div, the upper div, which is container. Okay, so I don't want that, so let me go ahead. I just want this particular div, so I will actually going to change. Instead of grabbing all the div, I will grab this class, which is list wrapper, specific to this div. So let's go ahead and change that, dot this, and now if I save, now go back, I refresh my app. Now if I click on here, now it is only going to give me this particular div. If I open this one in the console, let me make it bigger, the console a little bit, so you can see. Okay. It's the list wrapper, and then it has the list, buy milk, and the span and everything. Okay, if I click on this element, this div right here, you see that this div will give me the buy bread, so exact div. Now I want to add the class to the list. Now what is the relationship between this list and the div? This list is a child element, is a child for this particular div. So I can do something like so. So if I click on here, go back to my console log, instead of console logging the div, let me console log div dot child nodes. Now if I save this, let's see. If I click on here, now you can see the node list comes in, child. Okay, the first one will be like the text, bunch of things, right? The second one is it's organized like as an array. So the next one is actually going to be the one which actually has the list. Okay, the list element. All right, it's a lot of things, as you can see, a lot of objects right here, but this is the one I want, and I want to add the class list to the list. So the list element is sitting here at one position. All right, so I am actually going to make use of it. So let me make this a little smaller, get rid of the console, and here I'm gonna actually say, so let me do it. Actually, let me just show you what it looks like. Let me just go back to inspect right now, go back to console. Now here I know that list was on number 1, right? So I'm gonna say 1, like so in the square bracket. And if I save this, if I click on here, you see now if I click, it's only giving me the list items, like so, buy milk, buy bread, and buy cookies. So I have access to this list item. Awesome. So let me go and now close it. Now I actually want to copy this, get rid of the console log, and here I want to just say, hey, add the class list one, and this is going to be checked. If I save this, now if you see, if I click on here, it's working. Now if I add something else, let's say please like and share, add it, it also work on every element. Now this one removes it, this doesn't. So let me go ahead and create the remove function now. So for the remove function, obviously I need to go up and I need to grab the spans. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is actually going to be the same for each span. It's going to give me a single span and arrow function like so. For a single span, I obviously want to create an add event listener. It's going to listen for a click, and function is going to fire up a function, right? Like so, and curly brace. Now what it's going to do, it is going to do this span right here. Now if it's clicked, it is actually going one element above, so it is actually the display style, setting the style display to the div, which is a parent, right? The span, what's the span parent element? The span's parent element is the div, and that's what I want. I want to set the display to the div of which is the parent node for the span. So same concept as a child node, I can also go back upwards with to the parent. So I can do this. I can actually put this into a variable. So I'm going to say remove div equals to, and that's going to be span dot parent node, which the same concept, child nodes and then parent node. And here I will set remove div, this which is the parent node, style dot display display equals none. So if I save this, see if it works. So obviously check works. Now yep, that works perfect. If I add something, let's say buy milk again, and then add, and let's say bread, add, okay, all good, all things works. Okay, fantastic. Now pretty much majority of the functionalities of this app works, and hopefully it makes sense. Now we have to think about some of the edge cases. Now one edge case is going to be, so what if I click on the add button without putting any text? What's going to happen? You see, it's just creating a bunch of list items, a bunch of spaces, okay, and with nothing else, and you don't want that, of course. So refresh this and let me see how can I get rid of this, get around this. Okay, so for this, what I want to do is I want to just add an if statement, a logic, and I'm going to say if there is something in the input, then create an element, otherwise give me an alert. So if you see in the finished product, if I click on here, it's giving me an alert, right? So that's what I'm going to build right now. It's simply, I'm going to just add an if statement saying if this input have a length, have something, then add it to the item list. If it doesn't, then alert me. Okay, so I'm going to say this is the beginning of the elements, right? So I don't want to create any elements unless there is something here in the input. So I'm going to say if, and open parentheses and open curly braces, this and all this, let's see, all this UL and everything will actually go to that if statement. In fact, let me grab all this to the if statement as well. There we go. All this needs to be in that if statement curly braces. So within that parentheses, I'm going to check something. I'm going to check what I'm going to say, this new item. So I'm going to say new item. If the new item, I'm going to put this and dot length, okay, because I have the length property, okay, is not equal to 0. That means it's not 0. There is a length. So if I have a text, the text has a length. It's a string, right? So if the new item dot length is not equal to 0, that means there's something. You create this element. Go for it. But if it's 0, that means it does not have anything. Then I'm gonna say else and a block and just alert by saying please add an item. So if I save this, if I add right now, it's going to give me an alert. But if I add something here, so by dog food and add it, it's going to add it to the list. So now nobody can add, well, because it's already there, nobody can actually put like a 0 and add it, and it's going to give me an alert. Okay, one more edge cases is that once I add something, let's say buy cat food, and if I add it, you see that it still remains here. I don't want it here. I want it to, like, once it's getting added, I want this input to be ready to get another input. So to do that, what I'm actually going to do, so after creating all this element right here, and the remove, span, and every functions right at the bottom, I'm going to just go ahead and make this my.input value. I'm just gonna change this one right here equal to an empty string. Okay, so the value will go back to empty. So right now, if I do buy cat food, add, you see that immediately it goes to an empty. All right, perfect. So everything works right now. Nobody can put anything without putting any text. Please add an item. Or when the moment I put something, it's now an input is ready to get another item. All right, awesome. That's so one last thing I want to add right now is that I have to, when I, let's say, buy dog food, if I want to do, now I want to press enter on my keyboard and it's going to add that. So right now I physically have to move my mouse and go click on the add button. So how can I do that? So for that reason, I'm going to go at the very top right here. I'm going to create another function, and that's going to be involved on the my input. So on the my input dot, I'm going to add even listener, okay, on this input right here, because I want to invoke that enter into this input. So what I want is, in the parentheses, the event that I want to listen to on the input right here, it's called key up. Okay, key up. So once I press the, so there is two events, key down and key up. I want to listen to key up. So once I press down enter and then go up, release that enter, I want to do something. I want to add that items. Okay, so I want to say key up, comma, do a function which will take an event. Okay, and open up curly braces. Now in this function right now, we are taking an event argument. What is the event? Let's go and console log this. E. Now if I save this, let me make this bigger. I want to show you what event is. So inspect, I'll go to the console. There's a syntax error. As you can see right here, if you go to console, it actually tells you which line you have a problem with. So there's an uncaught syntax error in JavaScript line 12. So this one right here, because it actually does not need an arrow function, because it's not an arrow function. I created a function. All right. So if I save this, now there's no error. Awesome. So if I right now add something, you see it is now console logging. So whenever I'm using a key, whenever I'm pressing, releasing a key, is going to add the event to the console log. What are the event? Right now you see there is a key property. Is going to tell me what key I press. So if I press, let me get rid of this. Let me clear this, and I'm going to press. You see right now I'm pressing backspace, and it's giving me clear all this. Let me press A. Look at that. Here I have a key, a property, and that has an A. It's telling me that it's an A that I pressed, and he has a bunch of other stuff. So right now, I only need this object right here through the event. Okay, so it'll clear it, get rid of the console, make it smaller. And now, instead of console logging the E, I'm simply going to do a if check. So if, because I only want to add something to the list once only the enter key pressed, okay, and released. So I'm going to say e.keycode, that's coming from that, e.keycode is triple equals is exactly equals to 13. Now, where is 13? 13 is the numerical code version of enter key. So each key on your keyboard has a corresponding number to it, and for the enter, the number is 13. So if I press, so that means I'm saying if event.keycode is 13, then do something, which is only the enter key. Then this add button, I'm going to say add button dot click function. That's all I have to do. Save it. That only if I'm pressed, so my input has an event listener that will listen to a specific key code, which is only the E key code, which is the enter key code, and if that presses, it's going to activate the button with the click event. Okay, so basically what's happening right here on click is going to happen when I click the enter. All right, now let's try it. Thanks for watching. Enter. There you go. It's now added to the list. All right, so this is the full-fledged application. You can add so many features to it. I think it's a pretty good first time project to build. You learn a lot of things, how to engage with user input and how to show stuff on your web page. So it's a great application for beginners. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope the way I taught it makes sense. If you do have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And guys, if you like this video and if this video helped you in any shape or way, please like and share and subscribe if you're not. It means a lot. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Peace.